Hey there. So, over the years, I've watched a lot of polyglot YouTubers, but the most valuable language insight that I've gotten actually came from people from my everyday life who had little or zero to do with languages. Are you curious yet? Let's dive in. The first language insight came from one of my university friends. Now, personally, I am someone who is very visual when it comes to learning. I take a lot of notes, I read and I highlight a ton, I draw diagrams and arrows to show connections, and I also like to restructure tables from books in a way that makes more sense. Anyway, I was very surprised to find out that there are people who actually function in a completely different way. One day, my university friend asked me to explain what the professor covered in a lecture, and when I offered him my copious notes, he said that he'd actually understand it best if he listened to me explain it. That was the first time that I was introduced to the concept of auditory learning. Right now, I'm working on a more detailed video about it, but in short, if you want to make learning a foreign language a much smoother process, then do yourself a favor and figure out your learning style. If you are an auditory learner like my friend, you would find massive use in listening to beginner-level podcasts and other audio materials than in, say, reading a dialogue and highlighting new words, which is something that, on the contrary, would be really useful to a visual learner like myself. I'm also well aware that learning a foreign language should be a well-rounded experience. Because if you, for example, understand the spoken language but have trouble dealing with the written material, then I'm sorry, but you cannot say that you know that language properly. However, that said, identifying which method works best for you, both in terms of memorization and comprehension, and then tailoring your resources to suit your strengths will facilitate your task massively. So, if there is one thing that I would like you to take away from this video, it's this: pay attention to your learning style. And it doesn't necessarily have to be language specific. Just think about how you used to study back at school or at university, and then adjust your language resources based on that. I promise it will make a huge difference. Another language insight is more of a cautionary tale, not only to you, dear viewer, but also to myself. Now, there is this false belief that once you reach a certain level in a language, let's say B2 or C1, then you're done and you're never going to forget it. And yes, to some extent, you will retain a very high understanding of the written or spoken material, but if you haven't interacted with the language in a few years, then your speaking and your writing skills would seriously erode. I had this friend who studied English and Spanish linguistics at university, and to give you an idea of her Spanish, by the time she graduated, she was doing these walking tours around Kyiv, Ukraine, completely in Spanish. And that included talking about different architectural styles, historic events, and so on, to Spanish-speaking foreigners who would come to visit. That said, when she got a full-time job and began to travel a lot for work, her Spanish inevitably took a back seat. And to her credit, she did try to maintain it in the beginning, but ultimately she let it slide. And as a result, the last time we spoke, her Spanish did take a massive dip. Which is all to say that having a high level in a foreign language is not a guarantee that you will not lose your skills if you stop practicing it. Now, for those of you who might be facing a similar issue as my friend, I recommend that you watch this video about my preferred method for maintaining foreign languages if you have a very busy life. And no, it has nothing to do with listening to a podcast while doing the dishes or reviewing 10 new words every day. It's actually much more fun than that, plus it's genuinely low effort, so do give it a watch. Last but not least, I would like to touch on the topic of speaking. Now, a lot of people wait way too long to start speaking the language because there's this fear of making a stupid mistake and embarrassing yourself. But the truth is, mistakes go hand in hand with learning a foreign language. And since it's impossible to avoid them entirely, the only thing I can recommend you is to get over yourself and embrace them. When I was 18 years old, I participated in the European Union volunteering program in Gaziantep, southern Turkey, where I taught English to Syrian refugees for 2 months. And one of our coordinators was a young Turkish woman whose English was worse than my Turkish. And for context, back then my Turkish was limited to basic greetings, names of fruit and vegetables, and some simple phrases like, I teach English and I'm from Ukraine. What astonished me the most was that even though we didn't have any language in common, we felt this instant sympathy and were actually able to understand each other despite my broken Turkish and her pretty much non-existent English. And with time, our communication improved because our respective language skills improved, but we still marveled at how well we managed to understand each other with such limited vocabulary. Which is funny because later I discovered that actually 80% of communication is nonverbal. The moral of this story is this. Many people worry that not being able to speak the language well enough will prevent them from making friends with native speakers when they're abroad. And there is some truth to that because the better you express yourself, the more opportunities you'll have to find like-minded people. But what my experience has taught me is that you do not need perfect fluency to connect with others. All you need is the courage to try. Even with a handful of words and a lot of gestures, genuine human connection is possible. So please do not let the fear of imperfection keep you silent. Start speaking, make those mistakes, laugh at them, and let others laugh at them too if you've said something funny. I promise you I've had a fair share of those myself in all foreign languages. And yeah, with time, watch how those stumbling attempts transform into real conversations. And now, dear viewer, over to you. What's the most valuable language insight that you've ever received? Was it from a friend, a stranger while traveling, or maybe even from a language partner? Drop me in the comments below. I'm excited to read your stories, and as always, if you found this video useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more language learning content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.